Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to welcome everybody here live again to what should be a particularly extraordinary evening, focusing on the ochre record in the African origins of our species and on the earth pigment use of the artist painter Ann Gollifer, who's come to this country from Botswana, where she has her studio and where she works. So we're going to get a kind of dialogue between the ancient and modern of ochre. And this came out of, well, it's really thanks to Alicia, who's just gone down to help people with the doors at the moment. Alicia Colson, who knows Anne from some work she's been doing with her in Botswana, but she realized that Ann Gollifer was coming to this country in October. And in the summer, there was a wonderful Zoom meeting, international Zoom meeting with ochre experts from South Africa, WIT's Human Origins Centre, talking to Anne and to her collaborators in Botswana. So the way that the evening will go is, first of all, Rag's colleague and ochre expert, who is Ian Watts, who's just started working here as a Marie Curie Fellow in the Social Anthropology Department, will give a bit of an overview of humanity's very earliest ochre record. And then Anne is going to take us through her work and her work in collaboration with indigenous artists and ochre collectors in Botswana. And then we will have some videos to show of that her collaborator, Motsei Nkwemabala. And we are also joined from Gaborone by Tumelo Nkwe, who is working with Anne on this ochre and earth pigment research. So we'll be asking Tumelo if he can make a contribution as well. So I think that's the order of events, and I'm going to hand over to Ian to begin the show. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Camilla. As was touched on last week, symbolic culture is a realm of shared fictions that are treated as if they're objective facts. Things like paper money or God, but equally applying to language as we know it. It's our species' most unique trait, shared with at least late Neanderthals. As a form of communication, constituting its own unique kind of information, the evolution of symbolic culture is best approached as a kind of signaling behavior. Now, our genus, Homo, goes back about 2.5 million years. But in the archaeological record, we don't find any evidence, any direct evidence for signaling until about 500,000 years ago. And that evidence comprises the record of earth pigment use. And what we're talking about are red ochres, hematite and speculite. Now, red ochre is a generic term for any iron-enriched rock that when it's rubbed or scraped or ground can produce a red powder coming from the iron oxide known as hematite. Red ochres are sort of often weathered sedimentary rocks, and you've got pure hematite, and then within hematite, you've got a crystalline expression that has platy crystals called speculite that has a glittery appearance. The earliest occurrences are between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago from South Africa's Northern Cape, sites like Katupan and Wonderwerk Cave. And Wonderwerk is the most interesting. These are pieces of speculite and ochre and pure hematite, this one here, from Katupan. These are scraped pieces. But the most informative site is Wonderwerk. This is like, imagine a a huge double width railway tunnel going back into the side of a hill, at least 140 meters. The front of the cave, the archaeology goes back 1 million years, but we don't find any pigments until around 300 to 500,000 years ago, and they're right at the back, where it's so dark, you can only use it with firelight. That's an artificial light, but aside from the white there, you can just see the daylight at the front of the cave. So this is right from the very back. And what we find here are, again, specularite and pure hematite and red ochre. Now, ethnographically, specularite, its only known use is in context of visual display. So we can be fairly confident that the context of the finds at Wonderwerk implies brilliant, firelit ritual display. The nearest hematite outcrops to Wonderwerk are about 50 kilometers away, which suggests that the costs of these ritual performances weren't just in the song and dance, but in the long distance procurement and processing of the body pigments. Now, why am I saying it's body pigments and why am I saying it's ritual? This is sort of standard social anthropological theory going back to Durkheim. Social anthropologists have long considered costly group ritual to have been the mechanism by which shared fictions that are the basis of symbolic culture came to be established and faithfully transmitted. Durkheim went on to speculate that the earliest form of art would have been geometric designs painted on the bodies of ritual performers with red ochre. Put another way, skin-changing ritual performance was a necessary part of moving from a profane, egocentric identity to the sacred, sociocentric identity. Now, these earliest occurrences aren't restricted to Africa. They have isolated counterparts in Europe and in India, suggesting a shared adaptation to a common problem by a last common ancestor to both ourselves and Neanderthals. And in this period, say 300 to 500,000 years ago, they associate with what is behaviorally understood as the establishment of campsites as a sort of the focus of social organization. And the thing about campsites is that they require unprecedented levels of trust between unrelated individuals. And it's precisely in this kind of context that we would expect group ritual to evolve. Now, there's no necessary reason to assume symbolic culture from the earliest occurrences of red ochre. Now, again, going back to last week, we presented collectively a brief summary of the sex strike model, in which it was proposed that there were two stages to the evolution of collective ritual. In the first of which, performances were still tied to the presence of real menstrual blood. And only later, with further brain size increase, did it become necessary for these female coalitions to organize their cosmetic rituals on a monthly basis. Now, that's just the theory we're using. From about 500,000 years ago, for the next 400,000 years, the red ochre record is the only kind of repeatedly encountered evidence for signaling behaviors we have. Around 100,000 years ago, archaeologists consensually diagnose symbolic culture. And they do so on the basis of things like these seashell beads, complex geometric engravings, painting kits, and symbolically elaborated burials. There's only one shared trait among these diverse lines of evidence, and that's an association with red ochre as a residue on the beads, as the substrate for the earliest engravings, as the paint in the paint pot, and as an inclusion in a burial. Homo sapiens, our species, evolved in Africa between a little bit over 300,000 years ago and a little bit less than 200,000 years ago. And it's during this period that we see pigment use cropping up across the continent, from Sudan to the Cape. But it's not until right at the end of our speciation process, around 170,000 years ago, we think, that we can say, for Southern Africa at least, that red ochre use had become a regular and ubiquitous behavior in all cave and rock shelter campsites, and continues as such into the ethnographic or ethnohistorical present. Now, the best example of this, what I'm calling a dramatic shift from irregular use to regular use, is a site called Border Cave on the border between KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa and Eswatini, what used to be Swaziland. And this sequence goes back about 250,000 years. And we see this five-fold increase somewhere between 160,000 and 180,000 years ago. In the early layers, the ochre is so infrequent, it's just on the edge of archaeological visibility. You have to count 10,000 lithics before you find a single piece. Now, even from the beginning of occupation, estimated at around 250,000, there's suggestive evidence that early Homo sapiens were going to great lengths to procure the best quality pigments. Unfortunately, I left out a slide of Lion Cavern, but Lion Cavern is the earliest dated mine in the world. Unfortunately, it was only dated when they only had radiocarbon dating, but it was right at the limits of the technique, and it's recently been pushed back, still on the radiocarbon dates, to about 50,000. But there's no reason that the diggings couldn't go a lot further back than that. Now, the point about Lion Cavern is that it's about 120 kilometers northwest of Border Cave. And this is what the pigment looks like at Lion Cavern. This is a particular form of specular hematite. And this is the oldest piece from Border Cave. And although this is a bit abraded and rubbed, I think you can see that they look virtually identical. So again, people are going to great distances to get hold of what they considered high quality pigments. Now, going back to this five-fold increase at around 170,000, because we're now finding it in all caves and rock shelters, we can be fairly confident about inferring shared fictions across vast landscapes. And this becomes the hallmark of our dispersal out of Africa, appearing in India at about 75,000, in Australia at 55,000, in Europe at 45,000, and in the Americas at around 15,000. This is sort of the bow wave of modern humans moving out of Africa and replacing, often interbreeding with, pre-existing populations like Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia. Meanwhile, back in Africa, the assemblages, the ochre assemblages, are often large enough to identify past selective criteria. So in this chart, we're looking at the proportion of redness in relation to yellowness from a site called Blombos Cave in the Southern Cape, which spans a period from 70,000 to 100,000 years ago. So these are the reddest pieces, and we're looking at the proportions that are modified. And down here, we've got the yellowest pieces. So you can see very clearly that the redder the piece, the more likely it is to be utilized. And we see the same pattern, but now selected looking not just at redness, but at saturation. If you think of colors as being pastel or intermediate or fully saturated, so what we're looking at the top are the most saturated values and the reddest, then saturated reddy browns, and then intermediate, the reddest values here, intermediate reddy browns, and then the pastel ones down at the bottom. So you can see once again the same selection criteria. This is looking at over how intensively pieces are utilized. So the more intensively utilized a piece is, the more likely it is to be either very red and or very saturated. And so what do these intensively utilized pieces look like from about 100,000 years on? Well, the most intensively used pieces tend to take the form of crayons with honed points. Now, given that we only spread out from Africa in the last 100,000 years, it might be informative to briefly consider African hunter-gatherer pigment use. Unlike archaeologists, we're not restricted to earth pigments. We can extend the field to include red plant dyes and real blood, be it human blood or animal blood that is used in ritual contexts. And a fairly consistent pattern emerges looking at African hunter-gatherers like the forest hunter-gatherers of Central Africa, the Bushmen in Southern Africa, and the Hadza in East Africa. And the pattern is that the two most frequently encountered contexts of ritual use are either monarchical ritual and hunting rituals. Now and these are precisely the contexts which have been sort of theoretically predicted initially by a French guy called Alan Testart back in the 80s, and then Chris presenting an evolutionary account, which Testart didn't do, in the late 80s and early 90s. That the form of blood symbolism that is running throughout this story of the last 500,000 years was connecting women's blood with the blood of game animals as like a unifying metaphor. Now, among the various Bushman cultures of Southern Africa, aside from monarchical ritual and menstrual observances and hunting rituals, it's used in a wide variety of other ritual contexts, in greeting rituals between strangers, the healing dance, the induction into healing, marriage, mortuary rituals, and rainmaking rituals. And most famously, of course, in Southern African rock art, which is one of the most remarkable rock art bodies of evidence we have in the world, along with Australia and Europe. In the same region, it's been repeatedly observed that several of these other ritual contexts appear to be modeled on both the syntax and many of the symbols of monarchical ritual, which we were talking about last week in terms of it's most famously known in Bushman context as the Eland bull dance. So that's to give some sort of background to the archaeology of pigment use, and to sum up, from 300,000 to 100,000, it's the only evidence we've got for any kind of signaling behavior. I'm arguing that from 170,000 at least, we can be confident that this is not just group ritual, but that because of its ubiquity, we can infer symbolic culture. And because of the rapidity with which we see that shift at Border Cave from irregular to regular use, I'm suggesting that this is a shift from quantitative change to qualitative change. It's something like a revolution, which is exactly what we were predicting 25 years ago when we predicted then that it should be in place by 160,000. So it now looks, with dates from sites like Border Cave, that prediction is being met. So I'll leave it there.
I just wanted to say thank you to Camilla and Chris for inviting me, and also thank you to Ian for his interesting talk. Basically, I'm in London. It was coincidental that it meant that I could be here tonight. 2 years ago, it's taken 2 years to get back to London because, of course, we all know about COVID. And yes, I'm in London for the 154 Contemporary African Art Fair, which is happening next week at Somerset House on the Strand. So all of you have to come by and have a look at the work in the flesh, so to speak. And I will show you some of my work tonight. A little bit about me. My name's Ann Gollifer. I was born in Guyana. My mother is Amerindian. She's from the Warao Arawak people. My dad is from Essex. So I'm an interesting mixture. And currently I live and work in Botswana, and I have done so since 1985. My relationship with ochre is only, in terms of being like direct, is only 1 year old. So I'm as much of a student as anyone else in this room. I did a residency in Sweden in 2018, and I was looking at Linnaeus and Darwin and classifications and the whole classification of the human race. And I didn't like the very narrow classifications in terms of human skin colors. And I looked at the ochres and I thought, well, there's a much wider, more beautiful and poetic range. So I decided that I would restrict my practice to the ochres. Because it just seemed to make more sense to me than black and white or whatever. So from Sweden, I came to London and I went to some fabulous pigment shop, and I bought pigments and I bought gum arabic, and I decided to use them with watercolor. And I went back home to Botswana and started painting with them, and along came COVID and I ran out of pigment. And I think we were in lockdown for about 2 months. And after that, I wanted to get out of Gaborone. So I went to Mochudi, where I had worked in 1985 as an assistant to the curator there. And it's a museum. It's a lovely regional museum. And in the museum, I saw some ochre cakes. And I was like, wow, what are these? And the curator said, that we use them Letsoku. We use them for painting houses. Traditional mural painting on traditional houses. And of course, I've always, much more so in the mid-80s when I first moved to Botswana, used to see a lot of painted houses, especially in August, before the rains. There were a lot, but I've noticed that it's become less and less a thing that one sees as one travels around. And it's becoming a hidden or maybe even a dying art. So I asked the curator, where can I get these beautiful colors? And he said, well, they're all local and they're traditional collections sites, and it's a women's job. So they're traditional women's collection sites. And I said, well, can you take me? So for sure. So the following week I came back, and I came back with Tumelo Nkwe, who's my colleague, and he's Botswana, and he's also from Mochudi. So as far as I was concerned, I can't pitch up in Mochudi with a spade and start digging up people's earth. So it was very nice for me to be accompanied by Tumi, who we're close friends and colleagues, and he's something of a personal assistant to me and a translator. So he came with me and we went to the museum, and we went to different sites, like a yellow riverbed, a red termite mound, and they told me these are the sites. And in the yellow riverbed, I met a woman, and she was like, well, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, are you collecting earth? And she said, yes. We spoke English and Setswana. My Setswana is not very good, but so Tumi helped me translate. And it turned out that she was a traditional painter, and she was painting a building in her yard. And I said, do you know all the colors? And she said, yes. So I said, could you help me find them? And she said, yes. She said, come back next week and come to my house and I'll show you how I paint. So that's exactly what I did. And it was just, I have a video of her doing the painting, which I'll show you, hopefully. It was just an amazing experience to see the earth being made, having been made into paint, which is mixed with cow dung traditionally. And it has to be green cow dung because it's sticky and it forms a really nice glue material like gum arabic would if you were doing watercolors. And so she showed me that whole thing. So the soil is collected and then it's pounded into like a coarse powder, and then it's mixed in with this green cow dung and a little bit of water, and it forms like a cement. Well, not a cement, but like a loose thing, and then it's put onto the wall, and when it dries, it's like cement. So it can last several years, actually. It doesn't just get washed off every rainy season, but traditionally, the houses are painted every year. And she also told me that she was a traditional healer, and that the little house that she was painting was her healing house, and that she looked after the health of pregnant women, and her interest was women and children, and that her husband was also a traditional healer, and he was much more broad. His expertise was broader. And incidentally, they both run a contemporary synchronous church in their backyard, which has been very small because of COVID. But it was a really fascinating, wonderful, and exciting experience to meet a traditional painter. And so she gave me access to all the colors that she collects. And she also took me with her on collection trips so that I could see where, like the yellows are from a riverbed, the reds are from termite. The best red is from a termite mound. It's just, I could eat it actually. It's like fudge. I mean, it's just beautiful. I'm a bit obsessed. And then the creams and the whites are from hillsides. And some of those are used in traditional pottery, I think, and they may be asbestos. I'm not sure. I'm still very new on the geology of everything. And all my knowledge is basically from asking and talking with Motsei and Tumi. And then, so basically I took these beautiful materials back to my studio and had this really strong feeling that I wanted to use everything that was natural and gentle, part of the environment basically, instead of, yeah, just trying to like think about that as well. So, and I started to make my own paint. Tumelo Nkwe then asked his dad if I could have his grandmother's traditional grinding stone, which is the most, it has a personality. It's very grumpy. It doesn't like glass things, breaks everything. It's this massive piece of granite amazingly enough, at home I pick up stones, I pick up leaves, I pick up twigs my whole life. And I had a stone that turned out to be a traditional grinding stone, which is now paired with that piece of granite. I've got photos to show you. So yeah, it was, I basically spent the last year discovering colors. The other source of the ochre was very interesting, and it kind of links up with Ian's talk, was from the Gaborone railway station. And there's a traditional market there, and they sell everything. Plastic goods, Maziziru tin goods, the herbalists are there, a much smaller section, and there's ladies there selling Letsoku, which is fine earth that's made into a powder that is a foundation. It's a cosmetic. So the traders buy this like a bag like this from their sources, and the sources from the east of Botswana, from the north all the way down to the south. So Zenete, Chividi, Mochudi, Lobatsi, all the way down the east, because the central part of Botswana is the Kalahari Desert, and it's sand. And in some places, the sand goes down kilometers. And there's very little clay deposits, but there are in the fossil riverbeds. And that's another place I'm going to go and look. But so these traders selves or the earth. And I'm not sure whether they grind them themselves. I don't think so. And they sell them for 20 pula a spoon, a dessert spoon. And I have to do a lot of haggling. Please, can I have the whole lot for less? But the really interesting is that range of color matches the Mochudi range of color, but it comes from all the way down, from north to south. And I had this really strong urge to make a catalogue. There's the catalogue that I've made is there, and you're very welcome to pass it around and for you guys to have a look at it. It's a catalogue of the colors, and I wanted to collect as many colors as possible, and then I matched them with the Motsei soil colors, and also with repro dot colors, and then with Setswana names, or, well, there's more than 20 languages spoken in Botswana, but the national language is, of course, Setswana and English, but Setswana is the national. And then there's Kalanga, and then there's a lot of Bushman languages. So my idea now is to see if I can find the names for the range of colors in the different languages. And the really interesting thing about Setswana is that there is no word for green or blue. So it's referred to in English as gru, because in Setswana, blue is Botala Jwa Luapi, which means the color of the sky. And green is Botala Jwa Setlare, which is the color of the trees. But there's loads and loads and loads of names in Setswana for browns because they match the cattle. And so I just think it would be a really fabulous thing to do. I mean, it's going to take years, is to match all the different nuances of color to the cattle colors. And I'm really excited about that. Yeah, so basically that's something that's really important to me. And I also have a really strong feeling that I have to know, if I'm using a color, I have to know where it's come from in Botswana. Somehow or other, it's like muting it. If it's just a color and it's somehow where it comes from, although they're all the same, because they're all the same all over the world. But so the place is important, and it makes it more meaningful for me when I'm using it, that I know where it's from. It's from Lobati from the south, or it's from Senete from the north. And then I can build stories around that as an artist, as a visual artist, because I didn't tell you, but that's what I am. And so the wonderful thing about working with the ochres was the excitement of learning how to make them into paint, which has taken me months, and also learning the range of colors and getting the whole material experience of being so close to the earth, which is a very spiritual experience as well, because each color has a different texture. For me, it has different smell. There's one beautiful cream that smells basically like peppermint. I mean, it does, I promise. And then there's a blood red that smells very irony, almost like blood. Maybe I'm being very subjective here, but I have that feeling, and they're all coarse or smooth or soft or hard. So that's all very well. But as a visual artist, how do I make that now into statements about the earth, about Botswana, about myself? How do I get relevance as a contemporary artist using this material and still having respect for where it comes from? So I would say that this year, most of my work has been trying to show the color range through my artwork, and also trying to draw on personal subject matter, mainly taken from my studio environment, things I've collected. And I feel that I've got a long way to go before I can master the language that I want to have working with this incredible, beautiful, beautiful material. I was talking to Motsei before I came, because we wanted to do some videos with her, and there are some, it's really important for me that Tumelo, the translator, and Motsei also speak to you, because it's not my story only. And I was explaining to her, she said, who is going to see these videos? Who are you going to talk to? And I said, well, there's teachers and there's students. And I said, and they live in London, and people have much less connection there with the earth. And then her husband said, but don't they have earth? And Tumi said, yes, they do, but it's underneath the pavement. So they don't touch it so much. I mean, you'll see the yard, the Nkwemabala yard in Mochudi. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful color of the earth there, and it's so much part of daily life. And then I also very cheekily said, and also some children think that milk comes from a box. And they were so horrified. Anyway, so I think I'd quite like to show you some slides now. So what I'm going to do is we'll just go through slides, and I'll just explain a little bit. But and then after that, I want to show you the videos, if we can, of Motsei. Okay, so this is Mochudi, contemporary Mochudi, the village. When I first moved to Botswana, most of the houses would have been thatched in traditional thatch, but now people prefer to use tiles and iron. That's Motsei, and that's a dry riverbed where we went to look for purple, the purple color. You see that's traditional beer carton there. We didn't drink it. Okay, so this is the termite mound where she gets red, and there's some kind of very special sacred quality, I would say, to this color because it comes from a termite mound, and it's termed lucky, and I'm not quite sure in what way it's lucky, but she said, well, sometimes there's a beehive in the middle of it, and you then get honey as well as the red color. But the red color has some very, very special spiritual meaning, and it's used in healing. That's what she's told me. So, and that's the digging of it. It can almost capture that wonderful, fabulous color. It's amazing. That's the one I want to eat. This is the house that she was painting when I met her, when I first went to her house. It's now got a roof on it. Yeah, so you can see yellow ochre, a pink ochre, and then this is Chibidu, the red. It looks a little bit more brown here, but that's the red. Yeah, this is a lovely sand yard. These are the ochre cakes that she provides me with. So she pounds the ochre, the soil that she gets, and then she mixes it with kraal manure, cow dung, and she makes it into cakes. So these ones I actually don't paint with because I mixed my the other soil with gum arabic to make classic watercolor. But they're very beautiful things in their own right. So I regrind them and then I sieve them to a small, and then after that I wash them, and yeah, it's a schlep. So they're washed and all the silt, all the heavy stuff is taken away, and I'm left with liquid, and then the liquid dries, and then this is my pigment, and then this has to be this is Tumi's grandma's grinding stone, and it's been in the family for generations. So then I have to regrind, and then I add gum arabic, and then it gets mulled or mixed up together, and then I have paint. So it's a really long process actually, but it has its own magical rhythm. And this is one of the ladies at the station, and she's showing me how she puts the ochre on her face to make a foundation. And she says it varnishes you, which makes you more beautiful. You can change the color and tone of your skin if you like. So yeah, and it's still used by many women. These are some of the ranges of color that I get, and my favorite way of discovering what that color might contain is having like a bed of water on a piece of paper, and then I just drop a drop of the paint, and then it splashes, and then you see it shows the range of what's within that single drop. So this is my first body of work was to do portraits of Botswana friends, people from Botswana that I knew, and I was looking at their names and the meaning of their names to go with the portraits. So Motsei came to my studio and I asked her to pose for me, which basically meant she lay on the table and I drew around her. And then her name means to take, but it can also mean to be taken as in marriage. And I asked a linguist, the professor at UB, what other meanings that could be. And he said, well, it depends. At the time that she was named, her name reflects the dreams and aspirations of her family. And I thought it was so beautiful. And I asked each one of my sitters, what would you like? What can I give you in this portrait? And she said, I want cattle and I want goats. So I gave her cattle and goats. And when I sent her the pictures, I sent them by WhatsApp or something. And she just said, thank you, madam. Meaning, it's okay. I like it. So I was really nervous because it's terrible to make a portrait of someone and they don't like it. Okay, so this is a piece that's going to be shown at 154. It's each one of these is 8.3, so it's kind of really big. It's about 2.5 meters by. So this is to show the color range, and then this was I use the human figure as a container for images in a way, and a container for the ochre. So coming to grips with subject matter with such a materially oriented body of work, which I did find really difficult. But I think the piece as one, all the pieces going together, has a stronger statement. This is a detail of one of the pieces. So I collect all sorts of stuff like little cowboy and Indian things. Oh, this is my Essex catfish. So this series is also at 154, and it's I've called it excavations. And I was thinking of the way excavations are carried out and the earth is dug into and it's all mapped out and gridded, and what you find and how do you interpret what you find. And I felt like I was having to excavate inside myself, in a sense, to find what was inside. Who I am in a way. And it's that whole thing about the human condition and what it is to be human, which is actually what's so wonderful about these talks. That's the urge that we're all trying to, the question we're all trying to ask, what is it to be human? So my answer right now, and it may change, hopefully it will, is to find out. So I was educated in Essex, and then this is a nod to my Guyanese side. So this is called Jaguar Mama. Someone said, oh my goodness, did it eat the baby? And I said, no, it's a mum. The baby would have been in pieces if it had been eaten. And then this is Kalahari Mermaid. So that's referencing where I live, my home, which is in Botswana. And yeah. So I think that's it for the slideshow. And now, can we have a light? We'll try and hopefully see if we can get some video for you. First one, say, yes, number 1. Yeah.
We see using the fact, is that going to be what? Is that going to be what? Let's see. Let's go.
Double click it. Yeah. I'm afraid that it's portrait because I took it the wrong way, but it's, can we get it in the middle?
Yes.
And the sound.
I'll start again.
Beautiful, so dexterous. Yeah, and it's just that thing. It's amazing. And that's the thing. And that was her grandson. So we could just go on to the next one. In the next video, she introduced all the videos are very short. With short clips. So that's Tumelo.
Ke nna Motsei Nkwemabala. Ke nna mo Mochudi. Ke tsholetse mo Mochudi. Ke be ke nyalwa ke bo Nkwemabala ko mo Lekolong. Mo Mochudi ke tsalwa mo kgotleng ya Lebotsa. Mme o bilwa ke lapile Lebotse mo kgotleng ya Lebotsa ke mokgata mo Mochudi. Nna ke nna mo Mochudi mo Ntshimong.
She said her name is Motsei Nkwemabala, and she's been married to the Nkwemabala family from Molekolole, but she is born and raised in Mochudi, and she stays in a village called Nkwe. That's where we are.
So Tumi, can you ask Motsei, how does she use the earth in her spiritual healing? What aspects of it does she use for her healing process?
That's why when I ran, I have a romantic way I want to say.
She said the reason why she uses Afro oak is because it's a traditional thing. It comes way back. It's like an inherited that she got from the parents. And when you are talking of oak and healing, she normally gets this calling, or the spirit has to tell her that when you heal people, you need to use F or ochre. So that's why she uses it mostly. Ke batla go rana gore bolelle ka tiriso ya itse gore o mongwe o dirisa mo mantleng ya ne batla go itse gore o mongwe le tiriso ya teng ke ya eng.
Tiriso tsa me bo di dintsi go go dira mantlo o penta ka one o go dira lapalapana lo e leng gore tiriso mo a bobedi ke ya ga ke dirisa sedimo thata e ke le motho wa o thusang batho mme ke ba thusa ka sedimo ga ke dirile ya ka o bona ke dira ga ke kopa ke ya ke ya
She mentioned that the uses for F pigments is one is to decorate the houses, like you can see. She uses it to decorate the houses. Another one is for traditional healing. She said for this particular one, it's for traditional healing where she asks for help from the spiritual people. She comes and kneels down and then she prays, basically. And I got on Brelan for it. You know, a panel came in the car. I mean, was strong. I mean, do that. I have practicing. Also, do some men.
Hey, more strong over to more sedimong that it was a fellow, but how will never said it was a strong attack. Never said you sit as a fool. Young disabled her with this sedimong. Dirisa Setswana, sengwe sa teng le Setswana. A ke ba ha bojalwa ya ka ha ke dira le di monna mo le mosadi mo ke tla le bojalwa ka phafana. Be ke re monna mo go le go tsetse bojalwa ke go tsa o ba ka go na ba ka bojalwa wa Setswana. Ke a tshela ha pela ga go mo ke dirileng. Ke be ke re mosadi mogolo ba go ke bolo yana tsa o ke a tshela ha teng. I can think about with a movie. Link clearly at the incident was a little bit of myself. You want to know all into million two, you will eat here. A young mission so when I'm going to be enough for this. Like it, Dira, we have one egg is sick, and I can allow out to our kids. You tell us that's fun. We have a man. I give you a solution.
What she says is the reason why she uses the F of traditional pigments is because she gets it from the elder people. So the elder people used only traditional things. That's why she's maintaining the traditional things. And one thing that she also mentioned is she also uses the traditional pots to come and ask for guidance from the elder. So there are two sides here. There's the grandmother and the grandfather. So she brings the traditional view because elder people loved the traditional view. So she brings the traditional view to put on two sides while she's asking for guidance from the elder people. Another thing She built this house because she loves traditional houses. But another thing is the main reason for building this house is to actually heal people and to use it as a traditional medicine house, as you can see.
Oh, this is Hello London.
The London people, Anne is my best friend. We work together, and I also love you. And I would like you to come see where I stay, and I would also love to see where you stay so that we can work together.
That's Motsei.
Wow, thank you. So,
Are there any questions?
yes. Thank you. Yeah. I think I can shut this down. Actually.
And I should stay standing here.
Better, yes. Do we want to ask Tumelo to say anything? The only problem is we can't show him, but
yeah.
he can speak.
If someone has a question for Tumi, I think it's easier if you can ask him something and then he can answer. Or I don't know, does Tumelo want to say hi? Can you hear me, Tumi?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, do you have a message for the people in London? Hi, Tumi.
No.
Is it hot?
Yes, it's slightly hot.
Yeah. And has it rained? And has it
No.
rained? No. Okay. Does anybody do you have anything to say to this lovely bunch of people?
Well, firstly, what I can say is when we started working together and started going into this journey, I didn't understand it firstly because I was wondering why my friend Anne wanted to study about ochres and why she wanted to know why people use ochres to decorate their houses. But it was something that I had knowledge of, and it's something that my mom uses even today. She still uses it at the farm. So I was wondering why she wanted to do something like this. But as time went on, and as I understood what she really wanted to do, that's when I knew, and I had interest to want to learn more as well, because back then it was just collecting soil and then decorating the houses. It was nothing really much about maybe doing a study or maybe doing something that someone could actually want to learn from you. So right now it's something that I'm kind of excited, and I would really want to continue the journey with her.
Well, it's great because there's a room full of people here who really would love to study more about the ochres. Yeah, and it's a really great way of talking about Botswana as well. Anybody have a question for Tumi? Yes.
What's the synchronistic church that you mentioned before that they have in their yard? What does that mean?
So it's a church that uses traditional beliefs along with Christian beliefs, and they're mixed together, and so they can be started by anybody really, but that person has to have some standing in the community and some power, some spiritual power. So they're very interesting churches. There's a lot of.
Why is it called synchronistic?
Because it's mixing. It's
mixing. Syncretic. Syncretic.
Yeah, it's mixing different belief systems, animism with Christianity.
Is there anyone on Zoom who would like a question? So we keep the Zoom people involved.
Let them out.
Let them out. Somebody, Leonhardt, my question about painting portraits.
Oh, this is the red thread.
Leonhardt, my question about painting portraits was the method of drawing around the person's outline a traditional way with ochre?
No, no, not at all. That's sort of something that I like the idea of using the human body as a container for ochres, and also obviously when you're painting it kind of bleeds out. So that's sort of like a symbolism of connecting the human with the earth and the environment as a whole. But I'm always really interested by the incredible symmetry and accurateness of when people paint on those walls. They make those beautiful, sometimes it's hearts, sometimes, and also the line around, it's exact. How? It's an intuitive understanding of the proportions of that house. And Motsei, all the painters or the work I've seen has that intuitive understanding of proportion and balance and symmetry or unbalance, if that's what they want. And that's learned from mother to daughter, grandma, daughter. It's amazing.
Can I reinforce the point which Ian made? He was showing those crayons, pointing out that they've got sharp beveled edges for precisely that, for producing a sharp outline of colour on a surface, which Ian and the rest of us think must be in the body. So don't smudge it. You wouldn't want to smudge it. It would be very, just like those heart-shaped on the house. Well, but before any of that would have happened, in terms of human origins, it would have been cosmetics on the human body. Long before anybody thought of painting on walls, either cave paintings or painting a house, it would be the body, which was the canvas.
Sorry, just checking the Zoom. Did you Zoom people hear what Chris was saying about the sharp crayons that Ian was showing us? That this sharp edge would have been used on bodies. So that line would have been very crisp. Were you hearing that?
Yes. Something else I just want to say, there's a beautiful book called Decorated Homes in Botswana, and it was written by Sandy and Alina Grant, and I think you might find it on Amazon, but they went all over the country and they took stunning photographs of many different decorated homes all over the country, and they also did research on what materials were used, how they did the decorations, who the women were, and it's been a huge source of inspiration and knowledge for me. So it's if you're interested, it's a really great book to try and get hold of. So that's Decorated Homes in Botswana by Sandy and Alina Grant.
Any more questions in the room? Kevin?
Yes, I was wondering why they built the houses before the rainy season, the start of the rainy season.
Maybe I got that wrong. I think I got that wrong. I think it's in autumn, which is in April, May. Yes. Yeah, it's after the rainy season. But also it's at harvest.
I wondered if
yes.
If they
I got that. Yeah, I got that completely wrong. And it's at harvest, I think at Harvest Festival as well. It's part of that time when everyone's brought in, they've done all the work, and then they go back to the village, and then they have time. And that's when they renew the paintings, and it's in autumn. So it's our autumn is in April, May. And
There's
not much rain.
Michael?
Do they still use the termite mounds? Because before cinder block, before cement was the colonials, they would fix their house up before the rains, and they'd use the termite, which is stronger than cement. So they fix the roof, they fix the walls with the termite.
Well, they use the soil from the termite mound for decoration on that, like a plaster. But maybe they also use, the thing is, the color is so important that I don't think they'd use it. The clay that they use for building their houses, the traditional houses, the color, it's more like a brown clay, comes from riverbeds, but and then that's then plastered with termites. But maybe that, do you know where that was? Was it in specific?
Yes, in East Africa and also West Africa, and especially where it rains a lot, so it's Congo and Zaire, and they have brown houses.
They use
Uganda.
Yeah, because the termite soil already has been processed.
Yes.
By the termites, and
it's a sealing layer. It's stronger than cement.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll ask her when I see her.
I wanted to say something about the Hadza and termite mounds, actually. But there is a question for Tumelo here. Someone asking if he could say some of the Setswana terms for different ochres, colors, different ochre colors. Tumelo, can you do that?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes. Yes, I can do that. But before that, there's a question that the same person, she asked, do you have any ochres from a place that you personally love a lot? So maybe if I can start by answering that one and then go to the other one. So the place that I would definitely like is the village that I come from, which is Mochudi. So where I stay is called Nkwe. So it's originally a red village. So you'd find when you walk in or when you drive in, it's literally red ochre everywhere. That's where Anne and I also picked a proper red from. So it's filled with red. So basically I'll say red. And then in terms of Botswana, different ochres in my language, I would say there is red, which is chibidu. And then there is black, which is para. And then we have more or less pink, which is liputsi. And say something.
Yellow.
Yeah. Yes.
Brown yellow.
Yes, and then there's brown yellow. So those are the most ones that and there's pink as well. But pink, we don't have pink in Setswana. Even the lady that we work with, we did ask her what pink is in Setswana, but we never got to get a concrete pink in our language. So I can't say pink in my language, sadly.
Did everyone hear that?
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Jimmy.
Thank you. Thanks, Jimmy.
You were going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about my experience, or our experience with the Hadza in East Africa, of use of termite earth, because it's called in Hadza hunku, and it has a very special usage. Women will gather this earth specifically, which has this beautiful red clay cement quality, very fine quality, and it is for making dolls, dolls which are presented to young women who haven't yet conceived. And the doll is baked with this special clay, but the mixture that's made once they've got the termite earth is to mix with ash and also blood, although I'm not exactly sure what blood is used. But that mixture is all put together to bake this figure, this anthropomorphic doll. And the idea with the doll is that the young woman is going to care for, look after that doll as if it were a child. And in fact, the doll is named, is given the name of a particular female relative that connects the doll to the ancestor. And the doll has the feet, it has the weight almost exactly of a baby, of a newborn, and also the feel once it's been baked of the skin. So it has a kind of transpiring quality to it. So this definitely is part of women's kind of ritual and reproductive cyclicity that this is used.
Why do they do that?
I think that they're trying to encourage and teach a young woman about caring, what her responsibility is going to be with a child. But it has sacred connections to ancestry through the links of the materials from the termite mounds and by the naming of the doll as an object. So these are called olenakwiko, the dolls, and they're one of the objects that can be part of the epime ritual, which is their key ritual.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know more about the connection with nature that they have, and the impact of that, impact of the lack of thereof, and just elaborate.
Well, I think that people like Motsei and Motsei have a very strong connection with nature. They still do. They have goats, they have some cows, they live. That traditional house is made of earth. Their house that they live in with the family is cement with a tin roof, but they're in nature all the time. And let's say, she goes and digs the earth. So she has a very strong connection, and she doesn't understand how people cannot. She thinks it makes you sick if you don't. She probably thinks there's something wrong with all of us. Or you.
Right.
But because I think that's the thing too. There's something very spiritual about working with earth, and that's why it's linked to her. She's a healer. It makes complete sense. That earth connection, as she said, we come from the earth and we end up in the earth again when we're gone or whatever. It's that cycle, and the knowledge of that cycle is what makes us care about the earth and the environment. And that's something that we've all got to start doing hectically, and I think it's a good thing to remember. And I think in a way that's why I'm so fascinated. I love the colors, and I love the idea of touching that earth, and she does too. We're both born on the same day. She's 8 years younger than me, but we have the same birthday. And and funnily enough, Tumi's surname is Nkwe, which means the leopard, and her name is Nkwemabala, which means the patterns of the leopard. And so we're all kind of bound up together in this fabulous camaraderie. And I said to her, do you think, because she said that the ancestors, when Tumi says the elders, he means the ancestors, those who have gone, but are still there as ancestors. I said, they tell you, they provide everything, they do everything. She said, yes. And I said, so did the ancestors send me? And she said, yes. I mean, of course, it's obvious. It's meant. It's like it's almost our relation, and everything is meant. And I really like that, and I feel that too. And this whole journey is a little bit mystical. It's very special.
I'm a geologist, and I'm a pigment scientist, and I'm really interested in visibility of ochres, iron ochres, copper ochres, cobalt ochres, whatever, in the landscape. And this choice of just red until about 10,000 years ago. And even even in Africa, to my knowledge, yellow ochres were really being exploited until and just
Do you want to take
Ian,
the
do you
last
want to
one?
come up?
Sorry.
Ian,
If
come on,
everybody
come
wants
on.
to see it
Yeah.
on the Zoom,
There may be more questions for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm interested in how people see paint materials in a pre-agricultural landscape. And one of the things, if you kind of, you very rarely see a pristine copper deposit these days, because of course they were all worked out in the Chalcolithic. But when you do, they are so blue and so green and so obvious. But why were people walking past that? Of course they could see it, but probably shooting the red. And I think you made a convincing argument for the blood there, that all the same, you know, if when I'm giving talks on pigments and things, I always ask people what their favourite colour is, and it's always blue. So why were people ignoring blues and even yellows and whites and blacks?
I mean, as far as the earth pigments are concerned, we've got about 2 or 3 sites predating 100,000 where you've got a small amount of yellow ochre. And I think first black pigments are, well, there's certainly less than 100,000. What I've noticed in Southern Africa, and the thing about Southern Africa is it's very different from East Africa. You've got lots of caves and rock shelters, which is important for me because that's where we can be sure that we're dealing with campsites, which from an evolutionary perspective is critical. This is where the action is. But it also reflects the underlying geology, that it's more of a sedimentary geology, whereas in East Africa it's more volcanic. So you get far more ochres in the region. And you're right. I mean, in that site, Katupan, in the Northern Cape, there are black pigments, there are yellow pigments in the area that just were ignored. They weren't interested, which does tend to reinforce the argument about blood symbolism. Things begin to change a bit about 70,000 years ago. We do see at places like Blombos, beginnings of some use of yellows and occasionally whites and oranges, but it's certainly not significant, and also blacks, but they remain very much a minority, and we don't really see any major change until, as you say, the Neolithic, when people are sort of really hunting around for ways to expand the palette to include blues and greens, and for those they typically had to turn to copper weathering products and fairly rare clays that can also produce those pigments.
Yeah.
But and the crucial thing, I think, I mean, this was a point that Salins made back in the 70s, which was that when it comes to the naming of colours and the sort of ending up with relatively abstract terms, his argument was that it's not just down to the hard wiring of the brain, that it's sort of black and white first and then red. Far from it. What is ritually significant are the first things to get abstractly labelled, like blood.
Because I've read that, the world colour survey is a lot on language and colour, and that you only need to name a colour. You only name a colour when you have a need to do so. And and I thought it's really interesting what you were saying about the grit colour of the sky. I mean, that's what it's like in modern Italian and modern Greek as well. They've got the loan word flame.
Well, Chibidu is the one colour that's named.
Yeah.
But it's interesting in terms of colour that I'm another painter, is that you're wanting to really get to the bottom of all the colours and give the name of the areas, etc. Actually, in our modern contemporary world, we're losing things. I use oil paint, we still have different colours. Like one of my favourites is Kaput Morton or Mars Violet. It's the same one. Dead.
Dead. Yeah.
but I mean, the oil paint still has them. Acrylic paint is drifting away, and then we're left with, you know, awful household paints, things like elephants and grass. You know, rubbish stuff. But it's actually, it's almost like it's eroding as the quality of the stuff we're using is eroding, or it's becoming more pathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
losing the purity
yeah,
of the
so if you
pigment
get,
as well.
come back, go back, let it get back to the origins.
Naming,
You might
yeah.
fill up the language again. I'd be very happy to have the language. Fill
Yeah.
up again.
I think it's a
Mhm.
fascinating
Yeah.
other study,
Yeah.
really.
Alicia.
It's interesting. Elbows too. He said that if you find black painting, think black magic. Red is not. But it's like
Where is that
this is
region?
the Canadian shield. There are very many black ones. There are few white ones. Mainly red. And he said the elves in the world say black.
Zoom, can you hear that, or do we need to say it again? Can you hear that? Yeah.
Say it again.
Say it again.
Alicia.
So Alicia, well, you could come here,
Uh-huh.
Alicia, to
Yeah.
say it, because that would be better.
To me, keeping
Thank
us
you, yes.
organized.
I learned last week from talking to an Indigenous elder that the colour used in the paintings reflects what's happening. Where Canadian Shield, the Canadian Shield, that's the area that goes all the way from Newfoundland all the way to northern Saskatchewan and northern Manitoba. He's a hereditary shaman. His father was a shaman. He was training to be apprentice, and so he didn't, because he was sent to residential school. But he's talking about what's happening because he's tired of the archaeologists going on and talking and saying what they mean. So he's like, I had enough. So he said, if you look at, I asked him about color, and he said that actually the color relates to the meaning. So if it's black, it's bad. We've been talking about sorcery and black magic, and how some people are good shamans and bad shamans, medicine men, all these terms. So he says the color is talking about the type of meaning.
And we have, sorry, there was another question here, and then.
Talk loud, talk loud.
Mentioned the importance of human body spontaneous.
Yeah.
Let's go the structure thing that I'm kind of interested about you saying with humans to sort of move inside.
To ask, I think, to
Yeah.
question, yeah.
But so, yeah, the question is about, is it about transformation rather than, it's like a process rather than something, you know, like a painting. Obviously, it's kind of a process when there is something that we,
And I think you're right, transformation. Yeah.
It's more about process rather than
I think that word is great, metamorphosis, transformation, and I think that
Can we repeat? Sorry, just
Yeah.
say what the question was for the Zoom people. And
okay,
sorry.
the question was, it was more of a statement about that perhaps what is it to be human is not just questioning who we are, but it's about the process of going through that questioning, which is transformative. Is that what you meant? And I would say, well, you know, if you, it's such a classic, where do we come from? Who are we? Where are we going? They answer that question, and it is transformative and it is a process. And to try and capture that in one image is very difficult. So I do tend to work in series. And as I said, I'm trying to figure out how I can make work that is about transformation, actually. Thank you. You're right.
I can't hear a word, I'm afraid.
You need to lift.
Can't hear one word.
Can you come and sit here and talk? Yeah.
I was just saying that about the connection with the earth, you know, the pigments, the color, the opposite of the material.
Well, that's kind of an answer to a question. Like engaging with the earth is answering some questions for me. And I think it does so for Motsei. In her work as a traditional healer, it's used as something that helps transformation, I think. I mean, I don't want to speak for her.
Can I come in?
Ian, come here.
I think there's another way we can look at this, is that we were talking about earlier, or I was talking about earlier, about the role of ritual. If you're talking about transformation, what is ritual? Ritual is moving from this world, the ordinary everyday world, to creating yourself into something else. Now, we're used to thinking of that in terms of statuses, like initiation ritual as an adolescent, birth, death. These are transformative processes, or they are constructed as such. But we're talking about the same thing in a sense. Like but ritual has a specific form. It's for a start, it's costly. You know, you're going to a great song and dance to get a message across to someone. So it's not transformative in just a sort of self-reflective kind of sense. It's social. We are becoming different in ritual. And that is where all this is coming from. I think that's really important to stress.
The girl in the first menstruation ritual, the Bushman, is transformed into an animal, an eland.
Mm.
I mean,
The beautiful, well, yeah, in the classic template, the classic template of the Bushman ritual, the girls' menarcheal ritual, we have the eland bull dance, where the girl herself becomes the fat male eland bull, and the women around her are dancing as in mating dance as eland cows. And it seems very powerful, the imagery that Anne has shown us of the portraits of Motsei with the cow and the beautiful goats, and that fluid kind of identity and connection of a woman with the animals. I thought that was incredibly powerful imagery indeed. I also thought the extraordinary mermaid from Kalahari, because that is believed to be possibly the ancestral homeland for the whole species of Homo sapiens, that area.
Yeah.
And of course, in those times, which is over 200,000 years ago, it was a lush paradise, a beautiful, a sea, a lake, a great lake, therefore the mermaid. So it's a wonderful reference for our species origins. I've got a couple of poets. So Chris was indicating, and then Vanessa, and who else was indicating? And Ian to talk again. So Chris, you've been waiting.
Yeah, just a quick comment on what you were saying about those questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? And where are we going? But this is Paul Gauguin's picture from Tahiti, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Sommes-nous? D'où venons-nous? Où allons-nous? Those are the three most important questions that we are facing now and again and again and again. That's all I want to say.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
And just elaborating on that point in terms of sort of what we might call shamans in healers in Bushman culture. One of them in particular, in sort of discussion with a Western specialist in healing traditions, talks about, well, you know, in trying to describe what is happening in Bushman rituals, in healing rituals and in monarchical ritual, he describes it as the movement between this world, which he calls second creation, and going back to the world of first creation. And in first creation, things aren't fixed. People become animals, animals become people, and the way you move, or the way he said that you move between these worlds is we bleed together. And as a healer, what he was claiming was that in a monarchical ritual, he would cut everyone's ears so that some of their blood would fall on the ground. So identifying them with the monarchical girl, that they're both moving, everyone, the whole community is moving into the world of first creation and then coming back again.
Vanessa, you want to come
Yeah,
here?
so I'll speak loudly. The transformative, which is coming up all the time. I mean, it is sounds arrogant coming from an artist, but of course, for many artists, it's meant to be what our job is. You know, transcendent. We might call it transcendent.
We try.
So the question, I mean, I'm not saying we all do it, we fail miserably, but the point about it is what we do. So the question that came from the back, which was about, I think, trying to associate the relationship between you digging in the earth, as it were, getting to the origins, and then being back in the studio making it work. I mean, it's completely, to any artist, that does make sense. It's not, there's nothing in that. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, it's specific to you to do it the way you're doing it. But of course, the interrelationship is completely understood. You know,
Yes.
that's my first point. My other point would be something a bit more problematic or simple, which was that you said, Ian, you said very early on in your talk that when people were painting their faces or using, let's call it just in some way, using it as an ornamentation, that it could have been, well, you said geometric, which I was very interested in because I've used geometry all my life because it's democratic and it belongs to nobody and everybody. That's what I mean to use it. But I wouldn't know. I mean, I know geometry comes in through the artifacts, the bowls that you show, which I'm not quite sure. I don't do your language. I don't know how many thousand years back that is. Millions of years. How many? You know what the space is between these. Can you answer me that? And how do you know that they were using geometry on their faces?
I think there are sort of two answers I can give to that. One is like how Durkheim arrived at his answer, because it was him who originally proposed that the earliest form of art would have been geometric designs painted on the body with red ochre. Why did he say that? Why abstract geometrics?
Yeah.
And he was saying, what you are creating, this process of transformation, it is not a thing that you can touch or something. It's something we are creating collectively. You need an abstraction to refer to it. You might call it God, rainbow snake, the sacred, whatever. It doesn't matter. But like it of itself, it is an abstraction. So that, and he was saying it had to be on the body because it's a performative. Now, another way of coming at it is from the archaeology. Amongst the earliest, when the archaeologists do eventually agree as to when they can identify symbolic culture, what were the lines of evidence I was showing? It was beads, it was burials, but the very first evidence that everyone accepted about 20 years ago, 18 years ago, were geometric engravings on pieces of ochre from Blombos Cave, dated at about 70,000. And then a few years later, we were able to push that back to about 100,000. So that is a sort of indirect kind of line of evidence as to why it's likely to, more likely to have been abstract geometrics than.
I just hope, you know, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's been expected.
Get a second crack. Go on.
Just a quick comment, really. Well, I think, I was doing a paint making workshop down in Cornwall at the weekend, and just, and I don't drive, and it just made me think about how sedentary you have to be a paint maker. You need a base, and Tumi's grandmother's grinding slab. I mean, you're not going to move that.
It's hectic,
I can't even, not something for nomadic lifestyles. I mean, I had to drink a bottle of quarries and
you want to
for a slab
say
of granite.
something about
It's
You know,
true.
your
It's
grandstand?
You can't, you need, you know, you need a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of water.
Yeah.
to,
Yes.
Just a quickie on that.
Come and say, because
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
better.
it's a very good point because I said the ochre record goes back maybe about 500,000, but and broadly coincides with the earliest evidence for campsites, but we don't begin to see widespread evidence and compelling evidence for campsites until a good bit later, more like 200,000, 250,000. And one of the things that we see in these more widely distributed campsites are grinding stones associated with the African Middle Stone Age, and many of them have oak pigment residues. And these things are heavy, you don't move them around. You know, so these are home bases that people are returning to regularly and on a seasonal basis as well, and they're leaving them there. So they're sort of investing in these places in the landscape.
I suppose nobody's going to steal them, are they? Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, are there more Zoom comments or questions? Anybody? We haven't heard too much from Zoom people.
Got them turned off.
I was wondering if people wanted to, I don't know if we can do it, but I mean, the classic example of today of an ethnic group in Africa that paint their bodies with ochre, are of course the Himba. I just wondered if, I don't know, can we, I don't know, is it silly to think of bringing those up? But I mean, there's this.
What do you mean bringing them up?
Well, I don't know.
What are they talking about?
Yeah, all right. We'll just, it's just that, okay, but
well,
the Himba paint their
that's a
bodies
whole-
and they only choose red. It's just red,
Yeah,
red,
they're
red,
famous
red,
for,
red, red,
for
red,
dressing in
absolutely
red
beautiful,
ochre.
beautiful red all over their
Himba,
bodies.
yes, yeah.
And it's entirely women's business to grind
Yes.
the ochre.
Yes. I mean, it is a pretty strong theme here from Anne's accounts and the discussions, the videos with Motsei and Tumelo, that this is women's tradition that's coming down, women's, and passed down through that line, matriline.
Miller?
Yes?
What was the place of the mermaid? Can you type it in for us?
Makadi pans or the Kalahari.
Kadi pans.
It's the.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I've got the spelling right.
The thing is, Kalahari is an anglified way of saying the Kalahari. It's the same word. It's just Kalahari has a few more G's. It's the same.
Yes.
It's the Kalahari. I
Brilliant.
prefer to use Kalahari because it's more beautiful, and it's the line from Botswana. So it's this huge. I mean, the Kalahari Sands area goes from South Africa through Botswana up into Zimbabwe to Namibia. It's massive, a huge, massive sand basin, and it's they know that there was a massive inland sea where Botswana is situated.
It's actually it's not only sand, is it? It's salt.
Well, the pans are salt, yeah. So they're hard calcrete basins in the sand that hold water longer. So instead, when it rains, it doesn't just go away into the sand. It stays on these calcrete pans and forms salt. It's the most beautiful place on earth.
Garden of Eden.
Botswana, I mean, Botswana is extremely beautiful. It's got the Okavango Delta, it's got the Makadi salt pans, it's the sand belt. I mean, it's a beautiful country.
Long may it be, remains so. Have we got any more questions, or should we wind it? Wind this up. We're coming towards time. I think we better had, and just to say, well, just thank you so much to both Ian, but especially Anne, for this amazing presentation and discussion. Thank you to everybody for lovely contributions. It's been such a fruitful exploration. That's everyone here. Alicia, thank you for setting the whole thing up.
Yes.
And yeah, just wonderful. And thank you very much, Zoom people, for your participation, most especially Tumelo and Nkwe, and your grandmother's name. Thank you so much. Yes, next week, Zoom people will want to know, is going to be a real change of subject, a shift of gear, an evolutionary ecology of science fiction, exploring human and alien potential relationships with Kathleen Bryson, and she will give a great talk, I know. And we are still in class for that talk. The following 2 weeks, we're going to be Zoom only, but we'll definitely Zoom whatever happens. So I hope Zoom people will be rejoining us, whoever can possibly do that. And I'm going to say goodbye and stop the recording. If it is it recording? Stop the recording. Who?
Some of us are going for a drink, aren't we?
Yeah, but I don't need to talk to the Zoom people about that. So you guys wait, and I'm just going to say goodbye to the Zoom people. Goodbye, and hopefully, yes, Happy New Moon. Cassandra's reminding us. Happy New Moon tomorrow. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye, and thank you so much to me for joining. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, and enjoy London.
Before people leave, well, I'm saying goodbye to everyone on Zoom. Thank you. I'm going to end the meeting for all.